Hey, I'm excited to be here. I feel much more in my element. The reason why I say that is this past week, the last couple of days, there's been a group of us who've been in the chapel. Maybe you've heard we're kind of redoing the chapel. And so I've tried to be this handyman, construction worker, and let's just say that's not my calling. So I am thankful to be in pastoral ministry. I mean, Juno and I were kind of trying to nail a couple of nails, and it probably took us like 12. I got some laughs. Who was that? They were probably there. And then, Jason's got a smirk on his face right now. He just does it in one hard hit, and I felt very ashamed. But hey, speaking of calling and vocation, if you're a college or young adult with us, this Sunday night we're actually going to be starting a series on calling. And so it's actually kind of fitting for me to feel this way. That's this past week in that. And by the way, check out the chapel. It's not completely done yet, but boy, does it look good. So we are excited for that. If you're new with us, my name is Mark Lohman. I'm the Adult Ministries Director here at New Life. And if you've been with us the last couple of months, you know that just last week, we closed our series on the book of Philippians, kind of this book of joy, so to speak. And so we're sad to leave it, because I know a lot of us were greatly encouraged by Paul's words of joy, of just sacrifice, of unity, of gratitude, and even just seeing these robust friendships that they had back then. And so we're sad to leave it. It was good, but at the same time, we are excited to start a new fall series next Sunday, and it's going to be called The Art of Neighboring, and we're going to take a good long stare at this dangerous command that Jesus gives us to love our neighbor. And I say dangerous because it's actually quite challenging. And if you're anything like me, to love your neighbor is easily said, but not easily done. And so that's what we'll be doing starting next Sunday. It's going to be challenging, it's going to be fun, and it's even going to involve a party. And I'll leave it at that, kind of give you a little teaser. But so because this Sunday is kind of a transitional Sunday, Philippians last week, and then next week we start our new series, I thought I would kind of kick things up a notch and talk about anger this morning. And so we don't usually like to talk about anger in church. And so I kind of want us to look at it in a different perspective too, because I think probably a lot of us are used to being told, don't get angry. It's nothing but negative. You got to laugh there. And so I want you, as we start this discussion, have this question in your mind. Reflect on this. What do you get angry at? What just kind of lights your fuse, right? And it's Sunday morning, and we like to be all nice and pretty and have our lives together here in church. But let's just be real, people. We all have our own little pet peeves that just strike us the wrong way, and our blood will rise at the second of whatever it is for us. And so if you're me, there's a couple things that come to my attention that just get me angry so easy. First one is food. When I go through a drive-through at a fast food restaurant, and I probably shouldn't because I try to eat healthy. Well, sometimes I don't try, actually. But I'll go through, I'll get my food at Taco Bell or whatever it is, and I'll go out, maybe I get out of the parking lot onto the street, maybe I even get home, and then guess what? I open up the bag, and they've messed up my order. And so Taco Bell, they have this bad habit of putting onions inside of their burritos, and I just can't stand that. And so it makes me angry. Get back in my car, I go back to Taco Bell, I park my car, I get out, I go inside, and I tell them, hey, you guys messed up. I need the food that I ordered. And I am just furious. Or how about those beloved drivers who cut you off on the 91 freeway, or the guy who's just sitting behind your tail tailgating? That just gets me. And so what do? Well, I speed up. And I kind of give them the stare, kind of let them know that I don't like what they did. And I know we're all kind of thinking right now, and some of us are probably even tempted to do a hand gesture. Yeah, I know you guys out there. Maybe I saw you, I'm just joking. And so then I speed up, and then I cut him or her off, and I'm angry. And the last one, which thankfully hasn't happened too much this year, is that when my sport teams lose, boy, do I get furious. And so about a month or two ago, I remember it was a nice, calm Sunday afternoon, and I'm watching the Angel game, and my girlfriend Rachel is in my room studying. I think she has a final coming up. and everything's kind of quiet. It's in the ninth inning, and all of a sudden you hear this, "You gotta be kidding me, come on!" And the Angels blew the game in the ninth inning, and I stormed out of the living room, into the hallway, into my room where she was studying, and I completely interrupted her study time. So anger, fury, all at the most small, insignificant, ludicrous things of life. So there's a daunting question kind of hanging on the window for us, and it's this. What does Jesus get angry at? So, since it's nice and quiet, let's go ahead and get our Bibles open. You can use your iPhone, your iPad. We'll have them on the screen behind me. If you do not have a Bible, please, we have Bibles underneath the chairs. They'll look like this, and we would love for you to take it home. We're not going to keep track of you or judge you or anything like that. We want to give away Bibles. So go ahead and turn to the best book in the Bible, the book of Mark. Come on, people. We're awake this morning. And if you're with me, it's on page 814 in this lovely Bible. And we're actually going to read two texts this morning because this same story is told twice. It's actually told 3 times. But in the book of Mark and in the book of Luke, the accounts are almost identical, but there are some very slight nuances, and so I want us to kind of compare these two texts, and that's why if you have your program, you'll see that both of the texts are on there. But the book of Mark first, as it should be. All right, verse 1. And again, Jesus entered the synagogue, and there was a man there who had a withered hand. They watched him, the Pharisees that is, to see whether he would cure him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. And he said to the man who had the withered hand, "Come forward." Then he said to them, the Pharisees, "Is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to kill?" But they were silent. And Jesus looked around at them with anger. He was grieved at their hardness of heart and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. And the Pharisees went out and immediately conspired with the Herodians against him, how to deny him. Flip a couple pages back, the very next book, the book of Luke, same story, chapter 6. It is on verse 6 in this one. On another Sabbath, Jesus entered the synagogue and taught, and there was a man there whose right hand was withered. The scribes and the Pharisees watched him to see whether he would cure on the Sabbath, so that they might find an accusation against him. And Luke adds this, even though he, or Jesus, knew what they were thinking, he said to the man who had the withered hand, "Come and stand here." He got up and stood there. And then Jesus said to the Pharisees, "I ask you, is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or destroy it?" After looking around at all of them, he said to him, "Stretch out your hand." He did so, and his hand was restored. And then Luke adds this, the Pharisees were filled with fury and discussed with one another what they might do to Jesus. Who here remembers Mr. Rogers? Yeah. I grew up watching Mr. Rogers, and so if you're young here and you don't know who this mysterious figure is, he was this popular TV host who hosted a show called Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And I bring up Mr. Rogers because he was this soft, calm, just graceful man. He was actually a minister, I believe, a Presbyterian minister that had this TV show. And he just had a very, very special, unique way of being able to reach out to young children. And if you know Mr. Rogers, you also know that he wore these cool sweaters, and I'm probably the biggest fan of those. But Mr. Rogers is one of those guys where you wouldn't dream of him getting angry. I don't think the guy could hurt a fly. I mean, he was so gentle. But don't we think of Jesus that way sometimes? Isn't Jesus another Mr. Rogers? Calm, soft, peaceful. This is the same Jesus who told people that when their enemy strikes you, turn your cheek. have them hit you again. I think we think of Jesus a lot like that. And so this concept, I've already kind of showed my cards here, of looking at Jesus when he's angry maybe seems weird, off, or not fitting because we don't think of Jesus that way. And I think the church, we do a great disservice to Christianity and Jesus when we don't talk about anger and what he got angry at, because we think that there's just a cultural connotation that anger is bad and you don't do it. Right? That's kind of what we think. Jesus is just another Mr. Rogers. But one of the most famous scenes in Jesus' life, whether you follow him or not, you probably know that towards the end of his life, before he was crucified, he went into a temple, which was kind of their political center of the day, with a whip in his hand and turning tables over with the other. He got angry. And in our scene this morning, Jesus wasn't just angry, he was intentionally provocative. You could say that he was looking for a fight. Why? Well, controversy wasn't anything new in Jesus' life. He was always in the middle of debate, and he was usually with this group called the Pharisees. And the Pharisees, maybe we've heard of them before, but they're just this group in the first century Jewish climate that stressed holiness and zeal for God's law. It was called the Torah. And the Torah is just this fancy word for what God did thousands of years ago when he gave Moses the laws on the top of the mountain. By the way, I just found out this past week that there's a new Exodus movie coming out, and Christian Bale is going to be the new Charlton Heston. If you know who that is, it's going to be a big change right there. So God gives Moses the Torah on this mountain. It's God's law, it's his commandments. And one of the central ingredients in that is the Sabbath, the day of rest. And so there are laws and commandments for Israel to follow on this day of rest. And really, what this day signified was creation and redemption. They were to look back when God created this world and he created it good. And then they're also to remember that God released his people from slavery in Egypt, creation and redemption. And so they were also to not only look to the past, but to look forward in the day when God would give them an eternal Sabbath, what we would call heaven, an ultimate time of rest and redemption. And so this is the Sabbath, this is the day of rest, and you remove yourself from all the chaos, all the busyness of life, just to meditate and focus on those things. And it's actually, that's a sermon in of itself in this crazy life that we live in America with technology and fast-paced culture. We need to take a day of rest. But that's another topic. But the part that caused so much disagreement and strife between Jesus and the Pharisees, and it wasn't hidden, everyone knew it, was that the Pharisees held to additional rules concerning the Sabbath that weren't in the Torah. There were rules there, but they added additional rules. And really, it was all about what not to do. That's what their focus lied. And so they had these extra little stipulations about don't do this, if this, don't do this. And that was the disagreement because Jesus didn't hold to any of those things. And so it was no secret that there was going to be some tension here. And so as you can imagine, the Pharisees are just waiting for Jesus to break the Sabbath. And the story right in front of this one is exactly a story about that. And they're kind of spying on him, and they're ready to accuse him. In today's lingo, they'd be Facebook stalking him. If you have Facebook, you know what that is. You just sit on someone's profile and you look at all the information of them. That's what the Pharisees are doing with Jesus here. The interesting thing is that Jesus knows exactly what they're thinking and what they're doing. He's not shocked, and he wants to start a controversy. He's going to start a fight. And by the way, a Mr. Rogers Jesus doesn't get crucified. You don't get put on a cross for being nice and peaceful all the time, at least. And so Jesus, he knows their thoughts. That's the phrase that Luke gives us. And so here it is. It's another Saturday That's their Sabbath. For us, it's usually a Sunday. And so Jesus arrives at the synagogue, which is really just this teaching place, maybe like our modern day classrooms or colleges. And this was a very normal thing for him to do. And lo and behold, there is an individual there with a crippled, shriveled right hand. And Luke tells us that it was his right hand. He gives us some more detail. Now, the thing you have to know about this individual is that in that time, he did not have a life-threatening urgent condition. If he didn't see the doctor that day, he wasn't going to die the next day. It was as uncompassionate as this seems, he was going to be fine, right? He would just go on the next day and the day after and the day after. One of the problems was, though, in that culture, your right hand was it's the right hand of power. And so because he couldn't use his right hand, he was forced to use his left hand. That brought a lot of shame to him. It was not a good thing. It may seem odd to us, but it was a big deal back then. And so here's this individual, has a crippled right hand. And for the Pharisees, a part of their code for the day of Sabbath was it was a day of rest. And because he wasn't in a life-threatening urgent condition, let him be. Maybe we'll spend time with him tomorrow. Maybe he can see the doctor tomorrow. Maybe if there is a healer out there, someone like Jesus, well, he can heal him tomorrow. If it was an urgent matter, like I said, then yes, they would have done something. That was a part of their law code. But it wasn't. And so what does Jesus do? Well, looks at him and calls him forward. But the thing you got to know is that Jesus could have called him forward just to maybe the side of the stage, so to speak, not kind of the center of attention. But your English translations won't bring it out, but I promise you in the Greek, what it gets at is that the man is standing right in the middle of the room, and that's where Jesus tells him to go. And so every eye is focused on this man. And of course, the Pharisees probably know where this is going. And so Jesus tells him to come forward. And Jesus asks kind of a smart aleck question here, the Pharisees. Verse 4 in Mark, he says, "Is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to kill?" And as we are now, they were silent. Jesus had come up with this clever little question, and it stumped them, and he knew it, and they knew it. And so, like I said, for the Pharisees, their tradition had developed so many extra stipulations that they didn't think they could heal or touch this guy. It wasn't important. And so Jesus' question doesn't have some special code to it. I think sometimes we read scripture like that. Oh, what's the meaning behind the meaning? He's pretty straightforward here. It's pretty evident what he's getting at. And he exaggerates a little bit by equating bad with killing or destroying. Like, all right, that's an exaggeration. We get it. But his point is straightforward. In other words, of course we would heal this man. What are you thinking? Are you nuts? I mean, the whole point of the Sabbath was exactly this idea of creation and redemption. This man is a creation of God, made in his image. Why would you not want to redeem him? His right hand needs to be redeemed, restored. So Mark, verse 5, says, Jesus looked at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart, and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. So, did Jesus know what he was doing here? Yep. Did he know that he was intentionally going to start a public controversy? Yep. Was he intentionally provocative and looking for a fight? Yep. Was he angry? Yep. And as Luke tells us, the Pharisees were angry too. But their anger is they kick it up a notch too. It's this word, orge, in the Greek, fury. And you cannot use a more emotionally loaded word than Luke does here. What type of anger is this? It's pathological rage, it's senseless, it's ridiculous, it's idiotic anger. A lot like me after I leave Taco Bell and they put onions in their burrito. So as both Mark and Luke tell us, we have two angers here, if you will. But obviously they're quite different. They contrast one another. And so the Pharisees' anger was kind of a spying, accusing-like sense that led to irrational fury and just senseless anger. Jesus' anger led to healing and restoration. What does your anger lead to? Because like I said, if your anger is anything like mine, I'm quite furious when the angels lose or someone cuts me off. And it's senseless, idiotic, and ridiculous. And so maybe this notion seems weird to you, this suggestion that your anger should lead to healing and restoration. I mean, is that even practical, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with anger in and of itself, and that's kind of actually one of the points I'm making, right? Jesus got angry. And if you know the scriptures, Paul in Ephesians chapter 4, he says, "In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry." Anger is fine. Get angry. Pastor said that. The problem is what we do with it that gets us in trouble. And so what do you do with your anger when you go to Taco Bell and they put onions in your burrito? How in the world do you go back there and channel your anger into healing and restoration? That's a weird situation to follow Jesus here. I mean, if you're like me, it's like, okay, maybe I go inside and I tell them to sell Chipotle burritos or something. I mean, Chipotle burritos, I think, do bring healing and restoration. If you're anything like me, at least they do. Well, I don't have them put onions on it. So we're good to go. But the point is, this is an awkward question to ask. The things we usually get angry at. How does that bring healing and restoration? And I think this is a valid question because it gets at the core of Jesus' anger, and it forces us to ask this: what does he get angry at? And see, for the Pharisees, the problem there and what Jesus got angry at was that they separated their love of God in honoring and obeying the Sabbath with love of neighbor. Two things that belonged together, loving God and loving your neighbor. You actually can't have one without the other. And so Jesus got angry at that. They cared more about following their cultural laws than healing and loving this poor, shamed man. And this fight mattered. Jesus was justified in his anger because he could lead it to restoration and healing. And so we may be puzzled how to turn our anger into healing and restoration because we're angry at the wrong things. Things that actually, in the big scope of life, don't really matter. We humans have no problem looking for a fight. At least I don't. The problem is they're usually over things not worth fighting for. And so we think this is an awkward, weird question to apply to something practical in life. Because the things that we get angry at, the fights we go looking for, well, those things actually don't even need that much restorative change in the first place. And so I think a lot of us, including me, have this tendency to get angry and mad at the little things in life because we're not looking for a big enough fight. Dare I say the things that Jesus fought for, the things that God is angry at. And when I say that phrase, and whenever we combine the two words of God and anger, kind of lights go off, right? We don't like talking about that. And so let me clarify what I mean by that. What I don't mean is a God who just randomly zaps someone because they did something wrong, or a God who's out on the street picketing in a cold-hearted manner. When I say God in anger, I'm not talking about that type of a thing. I'm talking about a God who's angry as it's embodied in Jesus. And so I think one of maybe the central texts that Jesus had in his mind as this scene is unfolding, and isn't quoted, so I could be wrong, but it certainly would have been in his heart, was this Old Testament text in Isaiah chapter 1. And you don't have to turn there, I'll read it out loud for us. It'll be on the screens. But I just want us to read it, because I think it'll set the tenor, the weight of what's going on here. So Isaiah, he's an Old Testament prophet. He says in verse 10 of chapter 1, "Hear the word of the Lord, you rulers of Sodom." If your city is ever called Sodom or Gomorrah, that's not a good thing, by the way. "Listen to the teaching of our God, you people of Gomorrah. What to me is the multitude of your sacrifices, says the Lord. I've had enough of burnt offerings of rams and the fat of fed beasts. I do not delight in the blood of bulls or of lambs or of goats. When you come to appear before me, who asked this from your hand? Trample my courts no more. Bringing offerings is futile. Incense is an abomination to me. New moon and Sabbath. And the calling of convocation, I cannot endure solemn assemblies with iniquity. Your new moons and your appointed festivals, my soul hates. They have become a burden to me. I'm weary of bearing them. When you stretch out your hands," interesting phrase there, "I will hide my eyes from you. Even though you make many prayers, I will not listen. Your hands are full of blood. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean, remove the evil of your doings from before my eyes. Cease to do evil, learn to do good, seek justice, rescue the oppressed, defend the orphan, plead for the widow." What does God want his people to fight for? What makes him angry? Lack of compassion, mercy, injustice, and oppression. What if those were the things that we got angry at and fought for in Artesia and Cerritos and Lakewood and Bellflower and Norwalk and Cypress, because I live there? See, we Christians, we're a weird, funny bunch. We like to get angry at the music that's played, the clothes we wear, and a bunch of other small little things. That's what we get angry at. And if you think I'm making that up, go ask a bunch of non-Christians what Christians get angry at, and they'll actually provide you with a pretty good checklist. It's quite alarming. And so I think we're constantly looking for a fight because we're not in one that matters. Jesus gives us something worth fighting for, an example of righteous anger that leads towards healing and restoration. And so some of us are here, and we don't get angry, right? Soft, gentle, even-keeled. And boy, am I thankful for people like that, people of long-standing patience. We have a lot to learn from people like that. But I wonder, for those of us in that category, should we get angry at the fact that those in our families or our neighbors or our coworkers have and struggle with emotional abuse or going through a divorce or have a disease? I think we should be outraged at things like that. Things that are sinful or evil and not from God and that go against his created purpose. We should be instruments, avenues for the gospel to take root. And the good news is that God is angry at everything that is not right in this world. And he longs to pour his love and his grace to bring about healing and restoration. Is that not true of all of us? That God has done that. And on the other side of the story, there's a lot of us here who we get angry so easily. It doesn't take much to light your fuse. And we know who those people are. And I wonder, for those of us in that category, and it's me sometimes, I'd be the first to admit it, what are we angry at? You know, anger is kind of a weird emotional thing because it can actually serve as a litmus test in showing you probably what you're passionate about, what your priorities are. Because we don't usually get angry at things that we don't care about. Sometimes we do, but not usually. And so chances are, if you're always finding yourself getting angry when things don't get or go your way, maybe the question is, are your priorities in life right? Or do you need to kind of realign some things? Anger does a pretty good job at showing you what you're angry at. And so then perhaps for some of us, we need to realign our main concerns in this life. Or does that very possibility make you angry? That the things you should be angry at can lead to healing and restoration. And so the call this morning, it isn't to pull yourself up on your moral bootstraps and wherever you are in this spectrum, because you'll get burnt out. That won't work, and it's not sustainable in the long term. And so what do we do? And I think at the core of this call to get angry at things that matter, things of human need, is really a call to focus on the good news that Jesus already went looking for a fight that matters. A fight for me, for you, for everyone. A fight that absolutely hates and is angry at everything that is wrong in this world. So you see anger in the Bible, when it's from God, not necessarily when it's from humans, but when God is angry, it's actually a good thing. It is something to celebrate. Why? Because it means that something's not right, and God is in the business of changing that. So does your anger lead to healing and restoration? What are you angry at? Or are you constantly looking for a fight because you're not in one that matters? If I can invite the worship team back up. If you're anything like me, this whole week and in preparing this, I felt a weight. And to be honest, I felt like someone took a crowbar and hit me in the forehead or something. It's heavy, heavy stuff. And so I think it's just best for us just to make room to provide a safe place just to respond. And the last thing is to go out of these doors and like something never happened or, oh, okay, that was cool. But man, if there's stuff that you want to pray for in this whole discussion, we have people in the back who would love to pray for you. If you're like me and it's like you just need to meditate and be reminded of what Jesus did for you on the cross, that he was angry, that sin is here, and that he's bringing healing and restoration. Partake of the bread in his blood. And if you find yourself always angry, just kind of in this dark place, we encourage you to light a candle to signify and to physically partake in this symbolism that says that anger can lead towards healing and restoration. Maybe you just sit there and just as the band plays these two songs, you just meditate. But let's not leave today not having our hearts transformed.